Will Iran speak? And how does the Trump show look from the Persian Gulf? Who better to ask than Professor Syed Mohammed Marandi, Chair of American Studies at the University of Tehran. Professor, thank you for joining us again. Before we come on to events in the Gulf, what do you think of Trump's appointments thus far?
I actually think that people shouldn't have expected anything different. But I'm somewhat encouraged because I think that the United States is more powerful today than it was last week. And it's not going to be more powerful in 2 months from now from what it is today. What is going to happen is that Trump is going to lead a government, from what we're seeing so far, that is only going to be more divisive inside the United States, and that is going to cause a lot of trouble because the economy is not doing well and it's going to do worse. And because Democrats who have been hypocritically silent about the genocide in Gaza, I'm sure they'll be using Gaza or anything else that they can to hit back at Trump. So he's going to have a lot of trouble at home. And the hypocrisy of the previous administration, people like Jake Sullivan or Netanyahu's lawyer, as they like to call him, Blinken, that hypocrisy is gone. This team is going to, I think, be more easy for people to read across the world. The United States has lost its soft power. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The last year in Gaza, their support for this ongoing Holocaust and now the genocidal attacks in Lebanon, where every day they're slaughtering 50 to 100 women and children, that has exposed them. But I think Trump is particularly bad, and his people are particularly bad at attempting to present the United States in a positive light. So I think this administration, this incoming administration, is going to marginalize the United States more than before, but it's not going to intimidate Iran, which I think is what you're going to be asking next. The Iranians are not going to be intimidated. The Iranians are going to strike back. They are going to punish the Israeli regime. And I have no doubt that although dark days are ahead and dark weeks and perhaps months are ahead, but I have no doubt that ultimately the Israeli regime will be defeated. Look at what Hezbollah has been doing in the last 24 hours. It's amazing. They're punishing the Israeli regime, and the regime is unable to advance in Lebanon. They're on the receiving end of strikes in Tel Aviv, despite the fact that they were supposed to go all the way to the Litani River in Lebanon. They were supposed to be there by now, but they're still stuck on the border. So I think people should not be intimidated by this gang that Trump is bringing to power. The United States is on the decline. If Trump was smart, he would be the anti-war president that he pretended to be, because that's what the United States needs. If it wants to prevent the economic collapse, if it wants to have a future for its people, it has to change course now. It has to shut down many of those military bases across the world, 800 to 900. It has to cut defense spending. It has to end the wars. It has to bring about stability in West Asia. But from what we're seeing, Trump does not seem to want that. And if he does want to do that, he will probably not be able to do that. Let me give you an interesting story, which it would be useful to your listeners. After Trump went to North Korea, a senior North Korean official met a senior Iranian official. And that official told me in a small gathering that he, out of curiosity, said, what was Trump like? Because you alluded to this in your introduction when you were talking about if Trump thinks he's smarter than them all. That official said that when Trump came and spoke, everything was fine. But as soon as he left the room and the negotiators began, and the National Security Advisor took charge, everything fell apart. In other words, the discussion was, it was pleasantries, and there were nothing really, nothing happened while the president was while Trump was meeting the North Korean leader. But as soon as the meeting between the two ended and the people who had to do the negotiations began to do their work, it was the same business as usual. It was sabotaged, and the whole thing fell apart. So let's pretend that Trump brings in all these horrible people in order to control them. Well, he didn't succeed last time round, and there's no reason to believe that he is going to succeed this time round. But I personally don't believe that that's really the case. I think he's very deeply influenced by the Zionist lobby, and they got what they want, just as they got what they wanted in previous administrations. But as I said, I think this administration doesn't even pretend to have a mask, and that is a good thing.
Yes, and the point you make about Trump's lack of soft power around the world, I mean, that I can testify from my own mailbag. It was perceived that I wanted Trump to win, and it was a very unpopular stand to take. People in Europe, people in the Western world in general, people on the Democratic side, 68, 9, 70 million of those, they'll all be gunning for Trump. And the turn that he's made, this warmongering turn that he's made, even if he thinks he can trump it with his own personality, is going to run into quite a lot of trouble. Now, going to the Middle East first as a whole, in the Levant, the situation as you just described it is that the Lebanese resistance have fought the Israeli occupation force to a standstill. It is the case that they do not control a single village in Lebanon after 50 days of all-out war, when their war aim was to drive the resistance all the way north past the Litani River. And even in Gaza, which they have completely flattened, and where they are starving, willfully starving to death, hundreds of thousands of people, they're still losing soldiers there. They're still unable to pacify the territory that they have complete control of now. And so, help me on this. How can they imagine that on top of those two situations, they can fight the Islamic Republic of Iran? That just makes no sense to me.
Well, before I answer that, I'd like to also point out that, and I'm sure that some of your viewers will not be happy with what I'm about to say, but I would not vote for Trump under any circumstances, but I don't see any reason why anyone could possibly vote for Harris. Voting for Harris means, and if she it means that you're trying to help her get into office. Her getting into office means a type of, and that would not be the intention, but Harris and the corporate media and the establishment would present it as a vindication that a year of Holocaust was the right thing to do, and Americans accept it. So I think Harris had to go. I think Biden had to go, and it's tragic that the regime in Washington gives people a choice between Trump and Harris, and it just shows that there's no democracy in the United States. But I don't think that voting for Harris would have been a good thing at all, because they had to be punished for what they did. And of course their punishment after they die, I think will be infinitely worse, but I think they deserve this punishment. But with regards to Israel, yes, they've lost in Gaza. This is the Israeli regime that would go all the way to the Suez Canal. Now they can't take Gaza after well over a year, despite the genocide. And in Lebanon now, they're killing between 50, as I said, to 100 civilians a day. And the difference between Lebanon and Gaza is that Lebanon is full of Western embassies. Beirut is full of embassies. They all see it. They know it. There are Western journalists based there. They see it happen. They call these Hezbollah targets because they want to hide the truth that they're just targeting women and children. They're slaughtering women and children because they are a part of a community that's supportive of the resistance. And these embassies and these Western journalists are all part of this conspiracy. And Hezbollah also, while fighting against this Israeli regime onslaught, has a problem that's that makes it more difficult than for Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And that is that they have enemies in Beirut who are conspiring against them with Western embassies as these genocidal attacks are being carried out. The same people who carried out the massacre in Sabra and Shatila, the camp, the Palestinian refugee camp, which killed 3,500 Palestinians and Shias in that camp. The same people are now having meetings with Western embassies to carry out a coup in Lebanon. Of course, they're going to fail, but it just shows how disgusting the West is, who their allies are, and how Western media is trying to hide the reality of these genocidal strikes in Lebanon. So Hezbollah has to be careful of what's happening behind it, but it is quite astounding how they are defeating the Israeli regime. It is extraordinary what these young men are doing on the battlefield and how the Israelis have failed to make any inroads. They only come in during the day, go in a kilometer or two, blow up people's homes, and do what they did in Gaza, take pictures of themselves wearing women's clothes, and then they retreat at night. And they get beaten and hammered and humiliated, and they've achieved nothing. So how is the Israeli regime, which cannot cross the Lebanese border, how is the Israeli regime that has failed in Gaza and it has only carried out a genocide, how does it think it's going to defeat Iran? The hope of the regime is not that it can defeat Iran, because Iran can crush it. The hope of the regime is to draw in the Americans. And of course, the Trump cabinet makes it seem that that is what the Americans would possibly do. But personally, I think it's quite clear for the sane but sinister people in Washington. Not everyone is sane, but those who are sane and sinister, that an American attack on Iran will result in utter devastation throughout the Persian Gulf region. All those bases will be destroyed. But far more important than the bases is the fact that those tiny dictatorships across the Persian Gulf, they will no longer exist. There will be no more oil and no more gas, either in the Persian Gulf. American bases in Iraq will be overrun. And in the Caucasus, there will be no oil either. So if Trump wants to destroy the U.S. economy, that's the choice that he can take. But I think that his supporters will very, very swiftly turn against him, and it will destabilize the United States. And if they're worried about refugees and illegal immigrants now, imagine what it will be like for Europe and the United States if there's an economic collapse, a global economic collapse. It's a very scary scenario. No one will win. The world will lose. It will affect people for decades to come, everyone across the world. But it will be a major catastrophe for Trump and his people too.
Now, they say in the US that Iran is trying to kill Trump. I don't know whether to laugh or cry at the information that they have so far released. An Iranian American and 2 New York Jewish Americans. It doesn't seem to add up to a conspiracy led by the Ayatollahs in Tehran to me. How seriously should we treat this?
Well, George, I think the timing is key. The story doesn't add up, and it is ridiculous. But why is it that right after Trump is elected president, this comes out? And of course, we know that elements within the deep state tried to murder Trump. Probably the same people are giving out this sort of disinformation. But more importantly, I think, is the timing. Why is it that after he was chosen that they chose to declare this? And why is it that at the same time, the United States government has been saying that they will swiftly send all the assistance that Congress has passed for Ukraine to Kiev? Because regardless of what Trump wants, and regardless of what his intentions are, and regardless of the gangsters that are surrounding him right now, what they want, I think that the deep state, the current regime in Washington, they want to intensify tensions with Russia and with Iran to ensure that Trump will fail. Because the United States is so deeply divided that these people would rather have the United States fail under Trump than to succeed under Trump. And of course, I think Trump will fail anyway. I think the United States is destined to fail, whether with Trump or without. And I think Trump is worse for the United States than anyone else for the reasons that I explained earlier. But I think that these two things are connected. The accusations, the ridiculous accusations against Iran, and the swift move to quickly give Ukraine all that they can before a change in government.